Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Charles from the channel Books on Stereo, and I'm here to give you guys my interview with the one, the only Tor Thom. Now, I am so sorry that I've been making you guys wait for these videos for so long. I hit my slump, but now I think I'm back in my groove. But like always, all his social media links will be linked in the description box down below, as well as all the books mentioned in the video. So if you want to check out any of the books that Tor mentioned, they'll be right down in the description box for you to find. And without further ado, let's kick it back to past Charles and let's get this interview on the road. Peace. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Charles from the channel Books on Stereo, and I have one of my favorite narrators here today on my channel. I have Tor Thom. So how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. So yeah, just I live in Michigan, and so we had a little tease this weekend, and so we got actually into the 60s, which is pretty big for Michigan. This in March,
Wow,
and had a
that's
little
amazing.
had a little melt off, but then
Right
one,
back to the cold weather.
yeah, we had like 1 to 4 inches depending upon where you were, where I am in Michigan today. So yeah, it's all right back.
But the first question I wanted to ask you is how did you get into narrating audiobooks and specifically romance audiobooks?
Yeah, so, well, 2 different stories, I guess. So, how I got into sort of voice acting and voice performance, um, eh, really kind of by accident, but I'll tell the story. I had people tell me on and off that, you'd have a great voice for, podcasting or whatever,
Mhm.
and, before I lived in Michigan, I lived in Texas actually, and, there was I moved around a good bit, but, there was a place on Tuesdays where I would go for Taco Tuesdays, and this sounds really silly, but, I would order, the meals, whatever,
Mhm.
and then I'd get up to the window, and there would just be a gaggle of young women there giving me my tacos, and and
Really?
and I always thought to myself, like, "This place is terribly managed." Um, why are all these I mean, shouldn't they be doing something else? Why are they all
Yeah.
and so then one day, uh, the woman who took my order didn't click the button or something, and I heard her yell out inside with the other employees,
Yeah.
"It's the guy with the voice." And so no, literally, and so, like, so it's like, oh, so she's prompting them all, and they're, like, coming from all their stations or whatever to hear me say, "Here's my" I don't know what they wanted, but anyway, yeah, and so that was the first step, and so then I started signing with a couple of agencies, ended up doing some political commercials, and the weird thing about, voiceover work or commercial work is that it's a lot of compact work, and you can make a pretty decent amount of money as long as you're, like, the voice of that campaign, whatever it
Mhm.
is. But then when it's over, you kind of enter this lull, and so, in one of those periods of a lull, I just had to really on a whim, I decided, I'm gonna fan, like, great sex scenes from literature, and I'm just gonna just narrate that scene, right? And so early on, I started with the famous, library scene in the book Atonement, which was made
Oh,
into a movie. Anyway, so now I made this little YouTube channel, whatever, and someone came along, the YouTube channel,
yeah.
and they said, "You really, uh, should be an audiobook narrator." And then they directed me to ACX, which is this place where audio, producers and narrators meet authors and rights holders, and yeah, I just started auditioning, there, and got one book and then another book, and the books just kind of slowly, and then I ended up, working for different kinds of authors and then ultimately getting connected to, audiobook publishing companies, and it
Mhm.
just kinda snowballed. But yeah, that's the story, yeah. And so, I mean, people come into this, business from a variety of directions.
Mhm.
Some actually come from the big screen, they or television. For me, I did for the most of my childhood, I acted on the small stage in community theater, and so it's not television, it's not, whatever, but that was sort of the acting background, and then have gotten better and better, and, yeah, and then built a little studio and then built another one and then built another one and just, and I've learned, and improved the microphones over the years and, yeah, it's just been fun.
How did you specifically kind of find your way into romance? Were you just offered books and you just kind of snowball and then kept on
Yeah.
going as well?
Yeah, I mean, people, sometimes reach out to me and they wanna know, like, "Hey, how did you get started in the industry?" "How did people find you?" Or whatever.
Mhm,
And, what I always tell people is that, I mean, you can play in any number of genres you wanna get into, and you can make goals and, try to get into that genre. But at least for me and most people that I know in the industry, the genre finds you. And so,
mhm.
I mean, it became pretty clear, that romance authors and people who owned the audio rights to romance books and casting directors, they were interested in me in various romance roles as kind of a strong alpha, brooding kind of male, whatever, and it's kind of a role that fit, and, yeah, I'm still doing it.
That's amazing because I feel like romance is one of those few genres where it has evolved more and more over the years to include narrators as well.
Right.
Like people will try out a new author if they have their favorite narrator or if they're
Right.
paired with a newer narrator.
Mhm.
We as listeners, we're like, oh, Tor Tom's duet narrating with like this new upcoming
Right,
narrator. I'm like,
right.
oh, okay, let me check that out. Like, I have no idea what this book is about. I never heard of this author, but I
Right.
know the narrators are really good. So it's like such a cool thing about the
Mhm.
romance audiobook community. I was like wondering how your thoughts on it. Like, do you find that some authors nowadays like write towards your voice, like knowing that you're going to narrate it?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I mean, I've been told that's the case. They don't usually reach out to me. I mean, I do have occasion where someone will say something like, "I wrote this book with your voice in mind." And so that, that kinda makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't always work out in terms of scheduling or whatever, but they use your voice as a template, or they'll say, "I listened to you narrating so and so's book, and that character is what I built my character around." And so
Yeah,
I mean, I authors are creative geniuses, and I mean that truly, and the whole process of the muses and where the ideas come from, and they have, some authors have these picture boards and
mhm.
others have sound clips or songs or different things, and so narrators can, um, be part of that kind of creative palette of a character,
But I
for
am
sure.
curious a little bit about your recording process. How do you
Mhm.
proof a book? Do you have any special like techniques for getting into character for each of the projects that you take on, and how does that recording process look like for you?
Yeah, and so it's a little different, for different books. If I'm just narrating myself, um, I usually use, punch and roll, which is the kinda
Mhm.
standard in the industry. So you make a mistake, you click some keys, it rolls back, and then you kind of speak over yourself until you picked up where you messed up.
Alrighty.
And then, the and this is where some narrators differ. Personally, I hire a proofer, um, immediately, and then they proof it, and then I do my own pickups, and then I send it off to the author or to the publisher, and and what I found is that creates a lot less work for the author or publisher, and so they wanna come back because it's easy for them, right? You have maybe
Mhm.
10, 15 pickups in a 5-hour book because you've already done the work for them, um, in the sense of
Mhm.
you've already paid someone to proof, and so that's what I do, yeah, and then, the book goes off and, someone goes through, kind of line by line, and
Mhm.
you do pickups, and you submit those back, and then the engineer pastes them in, make sure it
Mhm.
all works, and then they do the mastering, and away you go.
About how long does it take you, let's say, to record like maybe like a 6 and 9 hour, kind of like your standard romance audiobook length? About how many days would it take you to record a book around that length?
Yeah, I mean, I think all narrators have good days and bad days, kinda like good there's some days
Yeah.
you're just kind of on, and then there's some days you're not, and so, in general, I plan that to get an hour of finished audio, this is how I plan it. I'm gonna need an hour and 15 minutes of studio time. And so now sometimes for some books, it's an hour and 30 minutes. Now, let me also say that that doesn't include the prep time, which is, so before you actually get in the studio to read, you read through the whole manuscript, any words you don't know, any strange pronunciations, clarifying character pronunciations. There's a whole process
Mhm.
there before you actually get in the booth. And yeah, and so then when I'm finished, then I send that off to a proofer, and then they send back corrections, and then I send the files along. So I mean, that whole in terms of actual time from, prepping to, in the studio to after and then final pickups, it I've heard some people say, I'm 2.5 hours for every hour of finished audio. Mm,
Mhm.
it seems 3-ish plus hours, 4 is kind of on
Mhm.
the higher end, is how much is actually invested.
I always am curious about that because it seems like when authors like make the switch and go into audios, I'm like, then it's just like audio, audio, audio. I'm like, how are all these audios just coming out of the blue, just like
Yeah.
dropping out of nowhere? I was like, I'm happy. My wallet's not happy, but I am happy as a fan.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, you have a team, an army of narrators and engineers and casting directors, and they're just, boom, 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 and authors can make a good bit of money. I mean,
Mhm.
there are some production costs, obviously, because it's a human voice, and time's not free, but and also for a lot of authors, it gets them into a fan base, because there are, as some romance fans who only do audio.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they're not going to buy a Kindle. They're not going to buy, certainly not going to buy a hardcover or paperback or whatever. And their experience with romance is all audible, and so, or audio. So
Two, I'm curious, do you have a preferred narration setup? Do you like dual, multicast, or duet? Which ones have you enjoyed the most doing?
it to me, it really depends upon the story.
Mhm.
I will say that I often narrate in true duet. And so that there's let me say this, you can do this in different ways. So sometimes in duet, you record and the other person records, and you both send your files and your lines to an engineer, and they splice them together. I've done that. It's hard because you have to kind of constantly grab the emotion, and you don't have anyone to really play off of. But I also record often in true duet. So I'm on one mic and another narrator's on another mic, and we're separated so we're not bleeding, back and forth. And we're really just playing off of one another, kind of like a play. And that's probably my most favorite type of narration, because there's really a human being there, and they have their own emotion and their own intonation. And I'm not going to say it's easier necessarily, but there's just a natural flow because there's a real human being you're working with. And so, um, yeah, I probably prefer that, I would say. Yeah. I mean, the primary issue with duet is just the cost, because it's 2 narrators time, it's an engineer, next a lot of extra time, and so, um, I depending upon the author, it may or may not be feasible for them to get into duet, and, in terms of making the money back.
And two, I'm curious, now that we're seeing so many more independent audiobook production companies kind of springing up
Mhm,
in the romance
mhm.
community, do you
Yep.
find yourself getting like new manuscripts and new voices that you haven't, or new authors, I should say, that you haven't
Mhm.
narrated before, and you're seeing more and more different types of work come your way?
Yeah, no, I mean, so there really has been a growth. I mean, you have the traditional, I mean, there's kind of the powerhouse audiobook production companies, and then you have smaller audiobook, production companies, and then you have these kind of indie, audiobook production companies, and yes, they have proliferated. And I think what they're really doing is trying to help authors who may have felt like that audio was just too far removed from them. I mean, in terms of the finances of it, and just the logistics of it was overwhelming or whatever. Um, and so, yeah, there are new voices coming in, and so, you all of a sudden see a new author, and you're like, oh wow, I hadn't seen you before in audio, and I'm happy to be here to help.
I was curious because you do so many different subgenres within the romance genre.
Mhm.
Do you have a preferred favorite? Like, if all you can narrate is like this specific, like rom-coms or paranormal, do you have one genre that you would just be okay with narrating all your other audiobooks in that genre?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, it's one of the most common questions I get asked. I really do like the mixing and matching of genres and getting inside different storylines and inhabiting different characters. My personal favorite, regardless of genre, is kind of complicated dash broken, perhaps traumatized, hyper masculine kind of figure who's really trying to sort out emotions and sexual needs and desires. And, just I think for all narrators, being able to tap into elements of your own personal story and things you've experienced in your own life. And for whatever reason, kind of broken moments. It just kind of naturally work. Um, I'm I I'm a large human as it is. I'm 6'4" and kinda built like a linebacker, and so I,
Yeah.
I kind of naturally gravitate to that kind of, you know, machismo, but struggles with emotion, and has this kind of brokenness, and so that's easiest regardless of genre, whether it's rom-com, paranormal, whatever, yeah.
And do you have any favorite accents that you like to do? Like, do you like doing British or do you like doing like a mix of different
Um,
accents?
I I have a real affinity. I very much like to speak with the Russian. I like to talk like this and thinking these ways and wrestle with things and, "What do you think you're doing?" I like and one of my really close friends is, Ukrainian, actually, and spent some time in Russia, which is, and so I have his voice in my head, and I know exactly what he sounds like. He came to America when he was 40, and he's
Oh,
in his mid-50s now, but his accent is just
it's
like
still there.
it's spot on and perfect. So I grew up actually in the South, and so I can very easily kind of slip into a Texas, Oklahoma, or Alabama, Mississippi, kind of accent, and so British accent is fun, Scottish, it's fun, Irish, but for some reason, I don't know what it is with the Russian accent, that Eastern European, maybe a better way to phrase it, but, I really enjoy that a lot. Um, and I think the cowboy kind of Western thing is just it's so natural. There you go. Yeah, I've recently been narrating, an ongoing series in duet where I have to use it's set in Texas and, by Nicole Edwards. And,
Oh.
so all of the characters have different shades of kind of Texas and depths of voice, and so that's been a lot of fun.
And do you have any funny stories or funny recording incidences while you happen, or like you just said a wrong line so many different ways, like so wrongly, so many different times it took you so long to fix, or any funny stories like that?
Yeah, I mean, there are literally so many. I can actually tell you one from last night. I was recording, and the line was, and her eyebrow started twitching,
Yeah.
and I don't know where my head was was at, or not eyebrow, but eyelash. And so the eyebrow started twitching, and I said and her eyelash started twerking, and I was like, What? What?" And you just had to stop, like, you need to laugh, you laugh at yourself, and you just, keep going on, so
And two, I'm curious, are there any upcoming projects or any type of audiobooks that you're are recording or will be recording that you're super excited to talk about?
um, there's so many, and this is always hard because there's so many authors that I love, so I actually narrated, Fable of Happiness, books 1, 2, and 3 in duet with, Charlie Angel for Pepper Winners, and, book 1 actually won, an award for the best erotica book, and it's not it erotica is kind of it's more of a really graphic retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but, I loved telling those 3 stories, and, they gutted me. I mean, just kind of and the
Ooh.
stories stayed with me, but, Pepper Winters has another book that I don't think I can say a lot about yet, but, it's coming late March, April-ish, And Charlie Angel and I again are going to be narrating that in duet, and yeah, we're excited about it. But again, I mean, we're so privileged to narrate for so many. I mean, I just, at the end of the year, I go down the list of all the people that I've had a chance to work for and narrate,
Mhm.
opposite of. I mean, and it's really phenomenal. And I will say that the um uh, the female narrators in the romance genre are just incredibly talented human beings, and I I sometimes I sort of feel like I'm just the guy with the deep voice, and like you're the talent, but just really wonderful people. So yeah, I could go on and on, but that's kind of on the immediate horizon of some things I'm looking forward to. It's I I say my favorite.
That's your favorite? One of your favorites.
I mean, those 3 books have stayed with me. I mean, they're not going away.
I was curious, when you have to do like maybe like a female voice when you're narrating in the chapter or
Mhm.
have a line of dialogue and it's not in duet and you have to do it. How do you normally achieve that voice? Because I know for female narrators, I think it's a little bit easier because they just pitch their
Totally.
voice down.
Yeah.
But I was like
It
wondering for like you, like how do you get like where it doesn't sound like hi, but how do you kind of
yeah.
find that voice?
So, it o obviously, I don't have a good female voice. Um, and it just, I there's no way someone's gonna listen to me and think I sound like a woman. And so
Mhm,
when I first started out narrating, I tried to do something that kind of bordered a little bit on falsetto, but that's just grating on the ears. And so
mhm,
what 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 I generally try to do, depending upon the female character, is just raise it up, a couple of just make it a little softer, a little lighter. If it's a certain kind of female character, maybe a little more breath or airiness to it. Um, but trying to truly imitate a female voice when you have, my natural voice is it it doesn't go well. It just doesn't sound right, and frankly, I think it's distracting to listeners when you do that. And so, the key for me is just do enough that there's a clear enough differentiation between the 2 voices that the listener knows a woman's talking, and they can their mind can do the work of,
mhm,
"Okay, what does this female voice sound like?" And they can imagine it. Um,
mhm.
so yeah, that's what I do. But no, in general, I think, I mean, there are some really, really good female narrators who have, I wouldn't say passable, I mean, almost spot on, like,
I know you can't even tell.
no, yeah, it's scary. It's truly scary, but, yeah, it's harder the other way, particularly with a voice like mine or, similar, there's
Mhm.
there's a group of us that are kinda way down there, like, Aiden Snow and Troy Duran, and, I mean, we're all kind of, and so
Like,
it's
I'm really curious too, because you narrate some MM as well. How do you
Mhm,
go about distinguishing, and you can extrapolate this to other books that you work on that are in the MF genre. How do you really find the character's voice when you're when you're kind of really bringing them to life? Do you like notice like characteristics? Because like
mhm,
each and one of your audiobooks is not the same voice. Like it
right,
feels unique to that
mhm,
character. I'm not thinking, oh, this is Tor in a cowboy space romance or something.
right, right,
I'm
right,
thinking of is that character.
right, I mean, for me at least, it's, I don't wanna say sympathy or empathy or some combination thereof, but really trying to get inside the head of the character. And so, in a lot of male, there's often a struggle with sexual identity, and trying to sort that out, and what's gone on, and maybe they were married, and there's
Mhm,
always all kinds of things going on, and sometimes family drama. And so, um trying to really plug in and kind of grab things you can kind of hang and like, "Hey, this is who this person is." But again, it goes back to when I was talking earlier. You do have to prep, because it if you just jump in, with a character, you're not going to know enough to really capture, I mean, like for example, when they think, do they think quickly? Do they think
Mm,
do they think slowly? Is it agonizing? Is it almost like, and you can do things with your voice to almost feel the mental pain, just in terms of that. But if you don't read the story, you can't. And so, um, I, I'm a firm believer that y- you can't represent every voice, and you certainly can't
mm.
represent every voice authentically. Um, Narrators have limits, and we should know them. Um, and so when when someone presents a book to me and I choose to do that book, it's because I believe that I can do justice to what the author has done. And then it's ultimately up to the author and the listener as to whether or not I've succeeded.
And two, I want to ask you, what are some of your favorite audiobooks that you have either narrated or audiobooks that you have listened to and really enjoyed?
I mean, the Fable of Happiness is the most recent thing. I am not um as much, well, I shouldn't say a fan. I'm a huge fan of audiobooks. I don't have a great deal of time, frankly, just to sit around and
Mhm.
listen, you know, um, to a number of audiobooks. I recently listened to The Queen's Gambit, and it was really fantastic. Just really, really good. Um, Whenever I do have time to listen to an audiobook, I'm often not in the story as a listener, but I'm you know listening specifically to get a sense of how, Sebastian York or Andy Arndt is, or the sort of titans in the industry, and kind of watching them do their craft. In some ways, like an actor watching a movie, it's very
Mhm.
hard. It's very hard for them to really get in the movie, because they're constantly trying to figure out, okay, what decisions is the actor making here, and how are they conveying that emotion, and what's the director or producer, and so so much about what goes into those decisions that you find yourself thinking at the meta, and so
Mm.
yeah, if for good or bad, it makes it less enjoyable in terms of just the audiobook experience, but
But I have another question lined up.
sure, sure.
Are there any other genres outside of romance that you want to tackle a little bit more? Now that you are firmly established in the romance genre, would you want to do thrillers, historical fiction, action adventure type books?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really, really good question. My natural curiosities are, like history, and, I I could see myself enjoying mystery, kind of a, whodunit, kind of old school Agatha Christie kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I Thrillers, I'm not sure, like action adventure, I'm not really sure. But biography certainly, or narrating someone's autobiography, although increasingly, autobiographies are narrated by the author
By the
herself, or
person.
yeah, himself, which makes perfect sense. Um, yeah, I would say that.
Would you ever consider writing your own book and narrating? I know some narrators have kind of set their toe into the writing world a little bit more and more now these days.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good question too. I, I in a former life, I was an academic and actually a professor, and so I I have written books. They're not
Yeah.
they're not romance, or I mean they're academic kind of
Mhm.
books, and I've written articles and things like that, and so I have um I taught classics and I taught the ancient world, and so I've sometimes I know a lot about cultures and peoples, and so a lot of the groundwork that you'd have to do as an author to make a story genuine, um, I would know, and so I've sometimes thought about writing like period romance, but it's such a risky move because it either flies or flops, but um, I've thought about it for sure. We'll see.
I'm curious now. I'm curious now. Like, I'm gonna keep my eye out to see if you like float the idea even for them. Like, write it.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be rom-com at all. I mean, it would be, romance and intrigue, and, in the Roman Empire or something like that, or.
Hey,
Yeah.
Song of Achilles was really popular.
No, I know. I mean,
There's a market.
there is. No, there's all this stuff. So, yeah.
And then I have two final questions for you.
Sure.
One is easy, one is a little bit tougher.
Okay.
But the first one, let's go with the easy one. Are there any authors that you want to work with that you haven't worked with yet?
Oh, wow. See, these are great questions, but I feel like I'm always going to get in trouble. Um, I mean, there are so many. Just people that um, I'm like, oh, I love to narrate for so and so, and just that list can go on and on. I mean, if you look, at the bestsellers list, you can kind of get a sense of who's there and who you want to work with. And yeah, there are legendary authors outside of the romance or even indie romance community that you think to yourself, oh, would it be so amazing to narrate? Like a Stephen King book or something. But I mean,
Mhm,
it's almost, it's kind of like a fiction out there. Just to put your voice behind a book of that caliber and a book at that level.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, I just, for me, um, name matters, but writing ability,
mhm,
really, really matters. And this is hard to describe fully, and I don't think I understood it until I became a narrator, but you can almost tell good writing by the ease of narration.
mhm,
It's just there's a kind of flow. And so how big or small the author is, I don't really care, as long as, it's a good story. And, I like to be surprised at some point, you know? And the hard part is, so some narrators, and this is a very minority, they feel like
mhm,
you can't do justice to the surprise. But, so there's some narrators I was saying that they really feel like the surprise of, "Oh, I didn't realize that was, that person was, whatever," that should be genuine. Uh, for me, that's part of acting is
mhm.
to lead the listener to that same point with you, and you have the aha kind of together, and you inhabit that aha with them.
And
So
then my final question, which is a little bit of a doozy. I know there's been a recent discussion with the publishing of an article basically saying that artificial intelligence
mhm.
could mimic the same quality as audiobook narrators. What is your whole thought on that whole discussion?
This is an intense topic in the audiobook narration community, and so Um, I think some narrators hope that artificial intelligence just goes away, and it's not gonna be a thing. That really doesn't seem likely to me. Um,
Mhm,
it seems more likely to me that artificial intelligence and the artificial voice is going to continue to get better and better and better. The, um the catch is, and this is there's this phrase for with artificial intelligence and with, even, like, robots and face robots, it's called the uncanny valley, and it's a phrase actually that's used in literature about this, where you get close enough where it's really, really close, but it's not the same. It's not an
mhm,
actual human, and humans actually can have a revulsion to things in the uncanny valley. If they know it's a cartoon, if they know it's, like, kind of human, but if it and there's the uncanny valley is this weird place where it's like, it's almost there, but it's not quite there.
mhm,
Um, for me, an analogy that I've used is, like woodworking, and so there was a time, um, when if you wanted a cabinet made or you wanted anything made with wood, you were going, to have a human being who was trained and skilled using tools to produce that cabinet or that design.
mhm,
And that's not the way it is now. I mean, cabinets, by and large are made by robots, with electronic processes and cutting and in factory lines, and they just kind of turn that stuff out. But um there is still room for the human craftsman or craftsperson.
mhm,
That is the skilled worker who can do something that no machine could ever produce in a mass factory. Now, maybe one day artificial intelligence will be able to do that, but my own sense is that there are millions of audiobooks, there are millions of books published every year. A very small percentage of them actually make it into audio of all books published. My guess is that we're going to see increasingly artificial intelligence move into the nonfiction space. The last space it'll come into is romance or fiction at large.
Mhm.
Um, I think there will always be a place for the truly skilled narrator. In the same way that even after the advent of all the technology, on my woodmaker's analogy, um, cabinets are still overwhelmingly now made by machines, but
Mhm.
there are still incredibly gifted humans who are woodworkers, and there will still be incredibly gifted narrators. 5 or 10 years from now, there may be far fewer narrators than there are now, um, and that may or may not be a good thing. But I can't imagine a world where humans and the producers and the casting directors and the proofers and all of it, that they just all just
Mhm.
somehow disappear, um, any more than I can imagine a movie or television industry where it's all these humanoids acting,
Mhm.
you know, but, where we'll be in 100 years, who knows? That's a whole different conversation, but that's my own sense on AI. Human beings have been struggling with the rise of technology. I used to actually teach students about the Luddite revolt, where there was
Oh, really?
there was an attempt to like destroy farm equipment because it
Mhm.
was replacing, human labor, and you can set it on fire, but you can't ultimately stop it.
Mhm.
And
You
so,
just
I
slow
mean,
it down a little bit.
yeah, and you ultimately learn how to readjust, and you know, I mean, technology did not ruin farming, right? It
Mhm.
changed it. It changed it. It changed how easily, how quickly, fields can be farmed. It changed the number of people employed by it. But it didn't completely eliminate humans, or at least it hasn't yet.
I did warn it wasn't gonna be a doozy of a
No, it's good.
question.
It's good. It's good.
It is a doozy, so, like, I had to ease you into it instead of
Sure.
dropping that at
Sure.
the beginning.
No,
But,
it's good.
thank you, so much again,
Oh, it's
Tor,
my
for coming
pleasure.
on my channel. It has
My
been
pleasure.
amazing talking to you. For you guys watching the video, if you wanna follow him, all the different social media links, they'll be in the description box down
Thank you.
below.
Thank you so
But
much.
thank you again, Tor, so much for coming on my channel, and I will catch you guys all for a brand new video. Bye,
Very good.
everyone.
Bye.